Tonight on the Boland Report, the latest on the first vice presidential debate, Canadian Liberal government introduced a single plastic ban to take place by the end of 2021. All this and more on a very special Boland Report for Wednesday, October 7, 2020. Welcome to the Boland Report. Hopefully the tech issue is resolved, which it looks like it has been with the audio. So here's the top news making the waves tonight. So tonight's show will be shorter than normal due to the Lake City, Utah. The candidates were separated by plastic barriers in an auditorium where any guest who refused to wear a mask would be removed. This is a backdrop for the only vice presidential debate of 2020. Harris condemned President Trump's leadership during the worst public health crisis in the century, saying the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. She also declared that she would not take a vaccine if Trump endorses without the backing of medical professionals. Pence refused to shift the conversation to the role of the vice president and returned to have the Trump administration handle the outbreak. Stop playing politics with people's lives, he said to Harris, stating, with certainty there will be a vaccine for COVID-19 by the end of the year. The candidates typically show up with a quiver of prepared one-liners, and Pence loosed one early. He accused Biden of copying the Trump administration plan to fight the coronavirus, dreading the charges of plagiarism that has helped sink Biden's first presidential run in 1988. It looks like a little bit of plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about, he said. The conversation then shifted to Trump taxes, energy policies, and hurricane and wildfire management. The vice presidential debate normally does not attract as much attention as the presidential one. In 2016, the matchup between Kane and Pence drew 37 million people, less than half than the viewers that watched Donald Trump face off against Democratic opposition Hillary Clinton. Trump defeated Clinton in the 2016 election. After Trump tested positive for the COVID-19 last week, however, the two people would be next in line for the presidency had taken on outside certificate. For those reasons and more, the debate may be the most meaningful presidential debate in recent history. It comes at a peculiar moment for the Republicans in particular, with growing concerns that Trump's position is weakening more as more than a dozen senior officials across the White House, the Pentagon, and inside his campaign are infected with the virus or in quarantine. Trailing the polls, Trump and Pence has no time to lose the election. A day is less than 4 weeks away, and millions of Americans are already casting their ballots. Harris made history by becoming the first black woman to stand on the vice presidential debate stage. The night offered her a prime opportunity to energize would-be voters who have shown only modest excitement of Biden, a lifelong politician with a mixed record on race and criminal justice, particularly in his early years in the Senate. Harris, 55, is the daughter of a Jamaican father and an Indian mother. She is also a former prosecutor who pointed questioning Trump's appointee and court nominee helped her make her a Democratic star. Pence is a 61-year-old former India governor, an ex-radio host, a Christian known for his folksy charm and unwavering loyalty to Trump. And while he's Trump's biggest public defender, the vice president does not share the presidential bash tone or undisciplined style. Just 8 days ago, Trump set the tone for the opening of the presidential debate, which was perhaps the ugliest in modern history. Wednesday's affair lived up with expectation, with the candidates adopting more measured and respectful tones. Harris' advisors say she does not plan to constantly fact-check Pence on stage and will instead spend her time making the case directly to the American people about what Biden-Harris administration will offer. She's not there to criticize Mike Pence, said an advisor who has been in Harris debate prep. She is there to really talk to people at home. Harris' team predicted she was focused on Trump's year-long effort to downplay the pandemic, the fact that many schools are still closed, and that Trump's declaration this week that he would end talks on the fresh coronavirus economic relief package until after the election. Harris said she would also have the chance to explain her views on law enforcement, an area which he irks some progressives, giving her a pass as a prosecutor. Meanwhile, Pence aimed to highlight the administration's economic records and attempt to portray the Democratic tickets as beholden the radical left. Former Republican Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin, who is helping the vice president prepare for the debate, said on Fox and Friends. Just as Harris will likely speak to Trump directly to Trump at times, Pence is likely to speak to Biden and progressive, who had called for a government-run healthcare system known as Medicare for all and sweeping environmental reforms to combat climate change and the Green New Deal, called the Green New Deal. Biden opposed both plans in favor of moderate steps that would be still among the most huge changes for healthcare and environmental policy in the modern era. Pence serves as the chair of the presidential coronavirus task force, which has failed to implement a comprehensive national strategy, even as Trump himself recovers from the disease and the national death toll surges past 210,000 with no end in sight. The candidates will appear on the stage 3.7 meters apart, and they were separated by plexiglass barriers. Both candidates released updated coronavirus tests ahead of the debate, proving that they were negative as of Tuesday. Critics suggest that Pence should not be at the debate at all. The vice president attended the event last week at the White House with Trump and others who have since tested positive, but Pence's staff and doctors insist that he does not to be quarantined under the Center for Disease Control guidelines. The CDC defines risky close contact as being within 1.5 meters of an infected person for at least 15 minutes starting from 2 days before the onset of symptoms or a positive test. While some Democrats have set high expectation for the debate, Harris and her allies has been trying to keep them low. We know that Vice President Pence is a former debater, and we know that tonight is going to be a challenge to send Cory Booker, a Democrat from New Jersey. But all those who know and love Kamala has a lot of confidence in her. When we come back, we will have the latest update on the COVID-19 response and news updates. We will be right back. Welcome back to the show. U.S. Marine Corps General test positive for coronavirus days after the Pentagon meeting. News has come after the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard tested positive Tuesday. The Assistant Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps had tested positive for the coronavirus days after he and members of the Joint Chief of Staff were in the Pentagon meeting with a Coast Guard leader who was infected with the virus. The Marine Corps said Wednesday that General Gary L. Thompson tested positive for the COVID-19. He attended a meeting of the Joint Chiefs on Friday when the commandant was not able to be there. The U.S. official said none of the other top military leaders in the meeting, including General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs Staff, has tested positive so far. Thomas and others have been self-quarantined since Tuesday when they found out that Charles W. Ray, the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard, who was at the meeting, has tested positive. At this time, we have no additional senior leader positive test results to report, said the Pentagon Chief Spokesperson Jonathan Hoffman. We'll continue to follow the CDC guideline for self-quarantine contact tracing. Ray attended the Joint Chief meeting Friday in a so-called tank, the classified meeting room in the Pentagon. Officials said that is where most of the military leaders were exposed to him, but he also said he had other meetings with officials. Trump is back at work in the Oval Office days after testing positive. The president has no COVID symptoms for more than 24 hours and has been fever-free for more than 4 days, said his doctor, Sheen Conley. In a video message on Wednesday, posted on Twitter, Mr. Trump said he felt great, adding, "I think this was a blessing from God." He said that he wanted all Americans to have access to the treatment he was given. Mr. Trump has promised to provide the drugs produced by Regen Pharmaceutical free of charge. He said the experimental antibody cocktail he was given last week was a cure rather than a therapeutic measure, adding that the hundreds of thousands of doses were nearly ready. The Regen drugs has not been approved by federal regulators. This was a blessing in disguise. I caught it. I heard about this drug. Let me take it. And it was incredible, he said, adding that he would seek emergency use authorization for the drugs. President Trump renewed his attacks on China, telling Americans, "You're not going to pay for it. It wasn't your fault that this happened. It was China's fault. And China's going to pay a big price. This was China's fault," according to the video. Earlier, Dr. Comey said that the president has not needed any additional oxygen since going to the hospital on Friday. He was discharged on Monday. Mr. Trump's supporters say he has shown leadership since his release from the hospital, but his opposition say his behavior has become increasingly erratic. The White House has also set out new safety measures after Trump returned from the hospital, and that news that another aide has tested positive for COVID-19. The presidential election is on November 3rd. One key issue in the run-up to the polling day is a coronavirus stimulus package for the economy. Mr. Trump appeared to abandon negotiation with the Democrats on Tuesday, only to say later he would agree to some measures individually. Confirmed cases of the coronavirus in Brazil has passed 5 million cases, with death in the country approaching 150,000, officials said. Brazil Health Ministry has reported 31,500 new cases on Tuesday, bringing the total infection to over 5 million cases. The country is the third worst hit for infection after the U.S. and India. The presidential chair has been accused of downplaying the risks of the virus throughout the pandemic, ignoring expert advice on restrictive measures. Mr. Boland has rejected criticism of his handling of the pandemic, but his decision to oppose lockdowns and focus on the economy has been hugely divisive. On Tuesday, Brazil recorded 734 new deaths, bringing the death toll to the country to 148,228, the ministry said. Brazil has the highest number of deaths in Latin America. The state of São Paulo has been the worst hit with around 36,000 deaths, followed by Rio with about 19,000. It is another milestone, but the picture is not as grim as a few weeks ago. The number of cases and deaths has been falling, although we're still talking about 5,000 deaths a week, down from around 7,000 at the peak. The absolute numbers are still far worse than Europe, but life here, it feels like it's returning to normal. Shops, restaurants, and some schools are starting to reopen. Despite initial criticism over the president Jar handling of the crisis, his downplaying of the virus from the very start, his approval rating has actually risen, thanks to generous government handouts to around 60 million informal workers. The question is whether that support will continue as the government starts to reduce the payments while unemployment soars. New restrictions for England is likely to happen next week. The coronavirus restrictions are to be further tightened in parts of England early next week, with the closures of bars and restaurants, and possibly that many news outlets have been told. There could be also a ban on overnight stays away from home. The government is also likely to introduce a three-tier system for local government, with different parts of the country placed in different categories. Ministers are still discussing on how restricted the top tier should be. It comes as significant new measures are introduced in Scotland. From Fridays, all pubs and restaurants across central Scotland, including Glasgow, and are to close, while in the rest of Scotland, hospitality venues must shut down by 8 o'clock, and alcohol can only be served outside. Industry leaders are warning the measure could be the final straw for many businesses. On Wednesday, the number of UK cases rose by 14,162, with a further 70 new deaths announced. Liverpool, Manchester, and Newcastle has the highest infection rate in the country. A government source told the BBC News that the situation in the northeast of England was very troubling, with growing numbers of hospital admissions and more elderly people in intensive care. Those areas will be placed at the top tier of restriction, possibly as early as Monday, in a new system called Local COVID Alert Level. But there remains a debate within the cabinet on how far the restriction in the top tier could go, with some in the number 10 arguing that for some measures like those in Scotland. Schools will remain open under all parts of the pandemic. When we come back, we'll have the latest global news headlines, and we will be closing. We will be right back. Welcome back. The former U.S. police officer charged with the murder of an unarmed black man, George Floyd, had been released from prison on bail. Derek Chauvin posted a $1 million bond and was released on Wednesday morning, court record shows. The white officer was filmed pressing a knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for almost 8 minutes before he died on May 25th. Mr. Floyd's death to global protests and also riots in the U.S. and calls for police reform spurred by the Black Lives Matter movement. Richard Chauvin was fired from his job and now awaits trial in March next year on charges of second-degree murder and manslaughter. 3 other officers, Alexander Chun, Thomas Lin, and Cho, was also fired and charged with aiding and abetting murder. All 4 officers accused in connection with the killing of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, has now posted bail and are free until the trial next year. Chauvin has been at the maximum security prison in Oak Park Heights, Minnesota, since late May. In June, a judge set the bail of $1.25 million with no precondition, or $1 million with condition includes Mr. Shaw not contact Mr. Floyd family, surrender his firearms, and not working in law enforcement security while he waits trial. Mitchell was released on condition bail, which court record shows guaranteed by a bail bond agency. CBS Minnesota reported in the U.S. bail bond agents promised to pay authority the full bail amount for the defendant if they cannot afford to do so or fail to appear in court. Mr. Chauvin was released from custody shortly before 11:30 local time on Wednesday, according to the sheriff's office. Ben Chum, a civil rights lawyer helping Mr. Floyd family, said his release on bail was a painful reminder that we are still far from achieving justice for George. Although George Floyd was denied justice in life, we will not rest until he afforded full justice in death, Mr. Cramp said. Currently, all 4 accused officers are scheduled to face trials together in March, but a judge is considering trying them separately. The incident that led to a prosecution also highlighted a deep wound over racial injustice in the U.S. The Black Lives Matter movement demonstration, some which has turned violent, became a central political issue in the run-up to the November presidential election. The Liberal has introduced a single plastic ban, which includes grocery bags and takeout container. The end is coming for plastic grocery bags, straws, and cutlery after the federal government announced today which single-use plastic will be covered by a national ban coming into effect next year. Environmental Minister Jonathan Wilson unveiled the list of soon-to-be banned items Wednesday morning at the Canadian Museum of History in Quebec. As it was compiling the list, the government said it considered plastics that are harmful to the environment and hard to recycle, and whether there are alternates available. The single-use plastic that would be banned are grocery checkout bags, straws, stir sticks, 6-pack rings, plastic cutlery, food takeout containers made from hard-to-recycle plastic like black plastic packaging. The regulation to introduce the ban will be finalized by the end of 2021, said the health minister. When the ban comes into effect, your local stores will be providing you with alternate to those bags, like reusable or paper bags in place of plastic, he said. I know it's presently hard to come back from the grocery store without single-use bags. You use it, you throw it in the recycling bin, and more often not, it ends up in the landfill. This has to change, which is why we're working with grocery and industry leaders and provinces and territory to keep more plastic in our economy than recycling. While the health minister emphasized the importance of reducing plastic waste, he said the ban is only a small step. I would like to say to you, if you put up the number of plastic products we use, the ban is probably a fraction of 1% of the products, he said. As part of the effort to reach this goal of zero plastic by 2030, the federal government said It will develop new standards for other plastic items that will require them to contain a minimum required recyclable material. What we are talking about is enhancing the rate in which recycling, reusing those products, and keeping those material in our economy, Wilkinson said. I want to say, so just before we close, the latest updates from the stock market. The Dow Jones was up 530 points today, and the NASDAQ was up 210 points based on promises of potential COVID updates. I want to say thank you for watching the Boland Report with myself. I hope you have an awesome rest of your night. As always, see you tomorrow for the latest news, sports, and more. Also, just to let you know, just a couple programming change for this coming weekend due to Thanksgiving long weekend in Canada. Friday, the Boland Report will air earlier in the morning, around 11:30 a.m. for 30 minutes. The Boland Report on Monday will air a special afternoon episode around 5 p.m. instead of the normal time of 7 p.m. So those are the key programming change. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day and rest of your evening. Thank you for watching.